Welcome back. You're listening to the Wire to Wire podcast. Today we're going to get into the Joe Kelly suspension and why I think it's complete and utter bullshit. Miami Marlins playing some stupid games and winning some stupid prizes, obviously. And then Stipe Miocic, the UFC heavyweight champion, giving his thoughts on some stipulations for his title fight coming up against DC. And the NBA bubble is working fantastically, and we get into that and what it means going forward for the playoff push.
All right, welcome to the Wire to Wire podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Smethurst, and without further ado, let's get right into it. And we're going to start with the Miami Marlins 17 positive cases, and people are freaking out. Some people are even calling for a end of the baseball season. Are you freaking kidding me? This is baseball. They have a minor league system. Triple A, double A, single A, low A, high A. They've got so many players in that organization right now. Kids that would love a chance to prove that they could play in the majors. And maybe one would surprise you, one or two will surprise you. But the fact that you have 17 positive tests should not pause your season. You have a minor league system. Plug and place, man. Let's go. Play ball. I get taking a couple days off, maybe canceling the first cup or postponing the first couple games against the Nationals. But the the players you have at the alternate sites are getting tested just as often as baseball. Now, or as the majors. Now I know every other day, obviously you can't do that anymore. This is ridiculous. You cannot do every other day testing. You need to up it to every day, and that's going to be more money out of the owner's pocket, more money out of the MLB's pocket. But guess what? It's COVID, man. You have to put out a product if you want to stay relevant. Because guess what's coming back this weekend? NBA. Guess what's coming? Guess what's getting traction on ESPN? The Major League Lacrosse League is getting plays on ESPN, and people are liking it. So, and not to mention, coming back also is the National Hockey League, and they're in a playoff push. So if you want to stay relevant baseball, plug and place, man. Take a couple days, get these players up here, and let's go. The fact that the Marlins are going to have to wait till Monday to play is ridiculous, especially since you've seen 17 cases by the Marlins and the team that they played that everyone was freaking out. Oh my God, what's happening to the Phillies? I can't even imagine how many cases they're going to have. Goose egg. Giant freaking goose egg. They've passed two tests. And now they're going to play a doubleheader to make sure that they make up the one game they missed, and then they're playing one on Sunday. Totally cool with that. Good decision. But Marlins and Marlins fans, here's the deal. Some of your players made poor decisions, didn't follow the guidelines, obviously, because guess what? The Phillies don't have any positive cases. So your season's going to suffer. There's consequences to your actions. Plain and simple. Sucks to suck. You guys got screwed because some of your players couldn't take their job seriously. You're in the middle of a 60 game sprint. 60 game sprint. Guess what happens when you guess what should happen at least when you're done with your game. You go home, you go to sleep, you go to the ballpark the next day. Now that can't be what happened here if you had 17 players test positive, because there's at least one or two that probably went out, pulled a Lou Williams, went to a nightclub, did something stupid, tried to go out, probably celebrate a victory. Hey man, 60 game season and you sucked last year. You're not a good team and you need every win possible. Now you're going to damage your team because the product they're going to be able to put out there is not as good. But guess what? That's baseball, because you know what? There's some pretty shitty rosters on the field right now in Major League Baseball. One of them being the San Francisco Giants, who, by the way, I'm totally ecstatic. We took 2 of 2 from the Dodgers, but we play the Padres like shit for some reason, so they're probably going to have a pretty bad series here. But that's beside the point. The fact that the Marlins are being helped out a little bit here and pushed off till Monday, no, 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 no. Maybe a couple days to make sure you test some kids that are coming up so you can fill a roster. But this is COVID, man. You guys made decisions. It's a 60-game sprint. You telling me for 60 games you're getting paid millions? If let's not even say that, minimum. You're getting paid league minimum, right? You're getting paid 500 like a good $100,000, a couple $100,000 to play a game in a time where there's people that have no fucking jobs. No way to make money. And you're going to go out and party? This is your fucking job, man. I don't care what you do for a living. Nothing. Don't care what you do. If you're a garbage man, if you're in the military, if you're a bag boy at a grocery store, most of the time, if you're in a career field where this is your career, this is what you're going to do, this is how you're going to put money in your pocket, food on the table for your family or just for yourself, usually you take it pretty fucking serious. Obviously, there were some players that didn't. They didn't follow the guidelines because the Marlins were on base quite a few times. If you weren't paying attention, quite a few times in this series against the Phillies. They played a pretty good series. They were on. Nobody in the Phillies popped on a COVID test. So, what is that saying? The Marlins are not taking this serious. The Phillies were in Miami, in Florida, in the hotbed of a lot of COVID cases right now. 0. So Miami's not taking this serious. Well, guess what? Your season should suffer 100%. Don't make other people's season suffer. Bring your minor leaguers up and play the game. Because that's just baseball. The rosters are not fair. Look at the rosters comparison between the Dodgers and the Giants. Okay, the Giants got some pretty good young players. Logan Webb looked fantastic. But the team that they're putting out there on the field is an abomination. McCarthy playing outfield, guys, terrible. In fact, Solano, he's a good veteran, not great. Shouldn't, would probably be a bench bat for a lot of teams. He's out there playing pretty much every day. Flores is over there throwing the ball into, I don't know where he's throwing, but he can't throw to first from third. Made 3 errors. But guess what? They went out and they battled. That's part of baseball. You got to go out on the field and you battle, no matter what kind of team you're putting out there. All right. So you got my point. Miami, I don't agree with how far they're pushing back their season. I don't know how they're going to make up their games. But if you got to push the season back a week or two to make sure they get all their games in, guess what? That's what you do. That's what you do. You don't cut their season short. At least if they're in contention, you make them play their games. If they're not in contention, screw it. Who cares, right? But if they're in contention, you have to make them play their games. But this is baseball. You have expanded rosters for a reason. And I'm sorry. Somebody made a mistake. There's consequences to every action. That's life. And guess what? That's baseball. All right. So, other baseball news. Huge deal. Joe Kelly over there being the hero we all need, unless you're an Astros fan, but honestly, who cares about you? Team's a cheater. Deal with it. I don't know how you can even justify the fact that, the mountains of evidence against your team. Cheaters. The fact that everyone expected this to happen. Joe Kelly was just the first arm to do it. They were plunked multiple times in the summer league, in spring training before COVID hit. It's going to happen. And Joe Kelly's gone out and said multiple times he has no idea where the ball's going when he throws it. Because if you've seen his windup, he puts everything into it and he just throws the ball. And he's got a really good curveball to go with it. So if you guys are not paying attention and you didn't see what happened, the highlights meant everywhere. But if you didn't see what happened, Joe Kelly goes out. He's got 1 out. Bregman comes up, 3-0 count, throws it behind him. By the way, very far behind him with a 96-mile-an-hour fastball up and in behind the batter. So Bregman's a little, hey, you're a little upset. I'd be upset too. Rightfully so. 96-mile-an-hour fastball up, that's a little dangerous, okay? Gets to his bag, gets to first base, makes a couple throws over pretty hard. And if the first baseman were to miss it, Bregman's taking it off the hip or off his back, but whatever. Goes out, walks the next batter. Walks the next batter. And then Correa takes a couple pitches in, and one of them being a curveball that went behind him, and everyone's kind of freaking out about that. But I mean, that one could have been unintentional. I mean, first and second, do you really want to plunk a batter and load the bases? I think that one's pretty unintentional. And then he goes out and he Ks Correa he throws about 6 straight curveballs and Ks Correa. And Correa was not on any curveball. And then Joe Kelly walks off the mound after the K, starts talking some shit, and Correa's talking shit back, saying stuff like, "Throw your fastball, motherfucker. Throw me a fastball." And Kelly's like, "I'm not gonna throw you a fucking fastball because you were sitting on the fastball, and I threw you 6 curveballs and you K'd." And he was making facial expressions and talking shit, both of them talking shit. No punches were thrown, just with Bregman and then the up and in curveball to Correa. Some tensions were there, right? But the fact that MLB baseball, the league, stepped into a situation where nobody at all was punished. I mean, Kelly wasn't thrown out of the game. He didn't do, the benches weren't even warned at that point after Bregman or even after Correa. Benches weren't warned. There was no warnings. And baseball thinks it's an okay thing to step in after the game's over. Dodgers ended up winning 5-2, which, I mean, I'm not happy about as a Giants fan. But the Dodgers end up winning 5-2. And then the league comes up and says, all right, we're going to step in here and kind of say, fuck what the umps say. And we're going to suspend Kelly 8 games in a 60-game season. And he's one of the better arms in the Dodgers bullpen. Why? He wasn't tossed. There was no punches thrown. He just talked shit. But let's put this in another scenario, right? Let's say Bregman gets, same thing happens. Bregman, walk, and then Correa. And Correa ends up sitting on a curveball after, curveball 4 in a row. Sits on a curveball and hits a nuke. And then pimps it, stares at it, walks around, goes to home, talks shit, says, something like, something to Kelly that Kelly didn't like. Punches weren't thrown. You know what the league would say? Absolutely nothing. The fact that you're giving Kelly 8 games is ridiculous. At most, you give him a verbal warning and a verbal warning to the rest of the league that, hey, the next guy that we think is intentional and throws at an Astros player, you're getting a suspension. But to suspend right off the bat, he didn't even plunk him. It was a curveball that missed up and in. Are you serious? You're going to bitch about a curveball? Now, the fastball up and in, I can see you have a problem with because, the way that head injuries are taken, even in baseball, we see it happen at least a couple times a year in 162 games where a fastball gets lost up and in, and it's just a terrible sight to see. He takes it off the helmet, and, the helmet can only do so much, especially when you're throwing 96, 97, which a lot of these guys nowadays are. The fact that the baseball thought it was okay to step in at this point is ridiculous. Is absolutely ridiculous. Now, I know they made a statement before COVID hit, the fact that we're not going to tolerate people throwing at Astros players. But you know what honestly, what it is it's the rest of the league going, hey, you did nothing to the actual Astros, the lineup. Oh, well, they lost their manager, AJ Hinch. It's a manager. And yeah, he's out of the... Who cares? Bregman didn't get anything. Bregman openly admitted, yeah, we cheated. Springer didn't get anything. Was part of it. Correa didn't get anything. Part of it. No suspensions for them at all. Their best players are still in the lineup playing the field, And guess what? They're still pretty fucking good. I'm not saying the Astros are not a good team. They are. Bregman's a fantastic third baseman. Springer's a great outfielder. Correa's a great shortstop when healthy. And the fact that they got nothing is ridiculous. So maybe baseball should take a step back. And yes, I get it. You're going to defend your players. Totally get it. Totally understand it. But you do it with you warn the rest of the league. Again, you say, hey, knock it off. But you're not going to stop this because players are pissed, especially teams like the Dodgers, teams like the Nationals, teams like the Yankees. Don't get me started on the Yankees. I think they cheated too. But teams like the Yankees, all teams that had to play the Astros in important games have a right to be upset 100%. Hell, even teams that are shitty and just in the division have a right to be upset. That's a huge competitive advantage, and you did nothing to the players. Nothing. I'm sorry. I'm on Joe Kelly's side here. I don't think he should get a suspension. I don't think it's right to throw out a player. I really don't. But when the league has done nothing and there's a World Series championship to the Astros name right now that has a ginormous asterisk next to it, and Rob Manfred has done nothing to the Astros. The league did nothing to the Astros. And you're surprised at the retaliation and you're just going to tell players to not do it? It's not going to happen. Bregman's going to get hit a lot. Springer's going to get hit a lot. Correa's going to get hit a lot. And Altuve might get buzzed a few times too. Even though he's said, and his team has said, he didn't have a part in it, but that whole the don't tear my jersey thing, that's pretty suspicious. All right, so let's get through that. Baseball's been fantastic. The start of the season is fantastic. Obviously, with fans like me, getting their hopes up, Dodgers taking 2 out of 4 in LA. Let's not get crazy. I know it's a shortened 60-game season, but it's still a 60-game season. Let's relax, okay? The great teams are going to space themselves from the shitty teams, and but just to have baseball back is fantastic. But there has been a few surprise teams. The Giants they're playing hard for Kapler. Other teams like the Rockies have actually looked pretty good, which I was shocked about just because their pitching is so bad. Not to mention you have teams like the Nationals, which I know they're struggling with some injuries here. Juan Soto being out too due to COVID, but the Nationals have struggled quite a bit. So everything's going to count, and every game's going to count. The Astros are dealing with some injuries. That Verlander being gone a couple weeks, that's a few starts. That's about three starts. That's going to hurt. You're already seeing teams play this game differently. Starters being on a shorter leash. The managers are managing these games like playoffs. So, but the fact that baseball's back and it's looking great, I don't think we should need to be worried about not finishing the season. They're going to manage this whole Marlins thing, but the rest of the league, COVID cases have been pretty slim with the travel. I think we should be fine there. Players are taking this serious. Some players are wearing masks on the field. In the dugout, there's been a few high fives, but I think that's nothing to be worried about. These guys are just getting excited. It's baseball, especially with the new generation. There's a lot more emotion in the game, and I think that's a wonderful thing, especially with these young kids coming up. It's a lot younger league, and I think people need to start paying attention to what we're getting to see in baseball with players like Trout, Judge, Yelich, Harper. They show so much emotion when they're playing, whether it be intensity like Harper or just the love of the game that Trout shows. It's so fun to watch. Or players like Javi Baez, which is a human highlight reel, and guess what? He talks shit and backs it up. It's fantastic to watch. And I think it's so good that they're on TV right now. All right, let's move on. We're gonna get into some MMA news. So Stipe Miocic is obviously taking on Daniel Cormier in probably one of the biggest trilogies in heavyweight history. These two, the winner is going to be touted as the greatest heavyweight of all time, and I think that's rightfully so. Excuse me. With everything that's going on with COVID, and they're moving into the performance center, and that's where they're fighting, and and when they were in Abu Dhabi and stuff like that, there's been a smaller cage, and we've seen fantastic results if you love seeing finishes. It's a lot less room to move, and it's been noticed, especially in the heavyweight division. These big boys don't have the room to move around. It's easier to cut off movement and stuff like that. So Stipe came out and said the smaller cage is not going to affect the fight. Well, I can't agree with that at all, because if you've ever seen Daniel Cormier fight, he's a very short. I'm not going to say small because he's a thick kid, but he's a small fighter at heavyweight, or I mean a short fighter at heavyweight, and he needs to get inside on these guys that are a lot taller, have the reach advantage, and it's you know with the bigger cage, it's easier for a guy like Stipe, who has a lot of movement, move around and stay on the outside and kind of pick DC apart. With the smaller cage and how smart of a fighter DC is, it's definitely going to play to his advantage, because he's going to be able to cut off Miocic more often and stay inside more often, and he's gonna turn it into a lot of dirty boxing, and he's already said he's gonna wrestle Stipe more, and that's gonna affect the way this fight plays out 100%. I think Stipe is really off on this. I think he's just trying to reassure his fans and reassure himself, honestly, that no matter what the size of the cage is, the fight's gonna play out the same. It's not, man. Cormier throws bombs, and Stipe's been through wars, and that goes both ways. Cormier's been through some wars and been knocked out a few times. This fight will not go 5 rounds. There's no chance. This fight does not go 5 rounds. It maybe goes 3. And as the fight gets closer, I'll give you my breakdown and how I think it's going to play out, and I'll give you my ultimate winner. But for Stipe to kind of come out and say that this, the smaller cage is going to play a difference, I think what that points to also is the fact that Stipe is already thinking about the smaller cage and how that's going to play a factor in this fight. And he might be a little worried about it because he doesn't have as much room to move. So, it's, there's going to be a lot of cage work in this fight. So that's a little bit of about the whole Stipe thing. Another big set of news, when it comes to UFC, is the fact that Cody Garbrandt has announced that he's going to move down to 125 pounds and fight Figueiredo for the championship. That's a wonderful fight. Figueiredo hits hard at 135. He obviously hits hard at 125. What he just did to Joseph Benavidez was one of the most lopsided title fights in history. He completely outclassed the man, and he's a great champion, and he's a great fighter. Now, Cody Garbrandt moving down to 125, there's some things to worry about here, and we've seen it happen before. Like with one of his biggest rivals in TJ Dillashaw. TJ Dillashaw is probably the greatest 135-pound fighter of all time. What he did at 135 pounds is fantastic. It cannot be, you can't get by it. Obviously, Cejudo looked great at 135, looked great at 125. He's a great fighter. He walked away, whatever. But when TJ Dillashaw dropped to 125 pounds, that's a big cut. And guess what? It's going to be a big cut for Garbrandt. But what happened was you saw a TJ Dillashaw, I know it was fast, but he was drawn out. You saw it the whole week leading up to the fight, the whole training camp leading up to the fight, all the pictures. Everyone's like, oh, look how shredded he is. Look how shredded he is. That was just because he had zero fat on his body and zero water in his body. The same thing's going to happen to Cody Garbrandt. Now, there's some other things to worry about here. Dillashaw he's been finished before at 135 leading up to that fight and stuff. But Garbrandt's been knocked out viciously at 135 pounds. Now, with the weight cut, we've seen it before. When people are drawn, or, when they're cutting too much weight, like a Anthony Johnson when he was cutting to 170 and even 185, Till more recently when he was cutting to 170 pounds, Jorge Masvidal when he was cutting to 155. It's not good when you're cutting too much weight, and I think that's what's going to happen here. And one thing that it affects that I think needs to be noted here is your chin and your recovery. When you're cutting too much weight, your recovery from a big shot goes down. Most notably, a fighter that you need to look at is a guy like Frankie Edgar. When he was fighting at 155 pounds in his prime and he was one of the best fighters in the world, he was able to take the big shots from the bigger fighters and recover like no one we've ever seen before. But then you look at TJ Dillashaw, and he took a shot from Cejudo, but Cejudo's not the biggest puncher in the world. And that shot ended the fight. And with a guy like Garbrandt, who's been knocked out viciously at 135 pounds, I think Figueiredo is going to be a big favorite here because he hits hard at 135 and he definitely hits hard at 125. And the big cut from Garbrandt is going to hurt his chin. Garbrandt's got fantastic head movement and looked great in his last fight. But this is going to be scary for Garbrandt because if he gets touched, he's going to go down, and I don't think he'll be able to recover. So I don't think this is a good move for Cody Garbrandt at all. At all. I think this is ill-advised. He looked very good at 135 in his last fight. Took a step up, and I think he's a better fit for 135. He's already been the champion there. But he's trying to get the quick title shot at 125, and I'm guessing what he wants to do is go down to 125, finish Figueiredo in fantastic fashion by knocking him out, and then going for that champ title fight against the 135-pound champion. That's probably the goal. Let's be honest. That's the goal, right? But I can't see this being a good move at all. I think Figueiredo is going to clip him, and then Garbrandt's going to go down and not be able to recover. He's already not, he's been, when he gets knocked out, you've seen him recover before at 135 pounds, but he just, falls up with a big shot because when he gets touched once, he wants to turn it into a brawl. And he stepped back from that in his last fight, but that's always going to be something you have to talk about here. I think this is a bad move. I think Figueiredo is going to win this fight. All right, so let's move on a little bit. We're going to get into some NBA. Obviously, they're picking up this weekend. As it gets closer next week, when they get more into full swing, I'm going to and I kind of watch some of the games, and I break down how, I kind of look at how each team's playing, because, as much as it's been nice to see these warm-up games, they're warm-up games, and you kind of see some of these players are playing like it. So I'm going to wait 1 week to give you my champion, who I think is going to win it all. But I think what we need to look at here is the fact that the bubble is working 100%. Obviously, some players are doing some stupid stuff, but hey, they're getting punished for it. And the league's come out and said, hey, once we start real games, if you guys get caught, and it's going to hurt your team and it's going to hurt your pocketbook. But another thing that should be noted is the fact that Zion, for game 1, is a game time decision. Now, I think it goes without saying, every game is going to count here, obviously, especially for a team like the Pelicans. They need to win every game. And I think if Zion plays, even if he misses game 1, if he plays, the Pelicans, the way they're playing right now and the way they were playing before, I think they were finding their groove, and I'm pretty sure, going to push to that 8th spot and beat out the Grizzlies. I think they're a better team. But, with Zion being gone for the last couple weeks, obviously due to a family issue, you hope everything's okay, but you're wondering where his body's at. And he's a gamer, so he's going to play well, but Can't have any. There's no minutes restrictions in this 8-game stretch, so that's a big deal. But as it gets closer, I'm gonna give you my breakdown on who I think is gonna make the playoffs, and I'm gonna break down each matchup and tell you who's gonna win it all. And I'm gonna be right, by the way. But the most noticeably, you have to with the NBA, the bubble is fantastic and it's working, but it's working for basketball and 22 teams. Okay, it's not working for that. It would be so hard to do a full season in a bubble. And I know everyone's looking at baseball with the whole Marlins thing, and then you're looking towards the NFL. With the NFL, there's already been players opting out, and we're going to move forward to the NFL. Players are already opting out. Most notably, as of right now, it's 6 players on the Patriots, which that's a big story. But Kansas City Chiefs got a couple. There's been quite a few players opting out, and some big players in like New England. Patrick Chung, Hightower, Damian Williams for the Kansas City Chiefs is opting out now. So there's been some big players and they're opting out, and I hear people going, "Well, why can't you just do a bubble for the NFL?" It's not gonna work, man. They still want to play 16 games, right? That's 4 months. 4 months in a bubble. Not to mention, you're going to have training camp starting pretty soon here, right now, actually. So you're going to actually have to move people during training camp. So 4 months of just regular season, not to mention probably another month or so in the preseason and the warm-ups and stuff. That's a long time in a bubble. Baseball's doing 60 games, and that's going to be long enough. I just don't think you can do a bubble for 32 teams, and the roster size of the NFL is just going to be a problem. And NBA is great because they have the smallest rosters size of any major sport that's talking about the bubble right now, and there's only 22 teams there, and as the teams get eliminated, they get to leave the bubble. There's more space, but to do a whole season with the NFL would just be insane. But players are opting out; they don't feel safe. And like I said before, when baseball was starting up and basketball was starting up, if players want to opt out, do not hold it against them. Whatever their reasons are, whether you agree with them or not, being for social justice reasons or for family health reasons, if they want to opt out, that's their choice. It's your choice to opt out in a regular season that's not affected by a pandemic. You saw it with Telvin Smith and the Jacksonville Jaguars. He just decided I don't want to play anymore. That's his decision. And guess what? He doesn't get paid. Gets his guaranteed money, obviously, but he doesn't get paid. If you don't want to get paid and you don't want to play, that's your decision. Whatever the reason is, we should not judge people on that. Especially if they're making it for family reasons, right? I'm a huge Giants fan, San Francisco Giants fan in baseball. Buster Posey, obviously, longer in the tooth. Not the same player he was, but he's a captain. He's a guy that he affects how people act in the clubhouse. He affects everything. He affects how people play defense. It's always good to have a Buster Posey on the team. He came out and said, "I don't want to play because I just adopted 2 twin baby girls, and I just, especially the fact that there's no bubble, I just don't want a chance bringing that home." Why should we judge that? That's a great decision. That's a guy making a decision for his family. Why is that a problem? I don't understand. I don't understand why all these people, whether you agree with the COVID restrictions or not, why are you judging these people for making this decision? Why are you judging these athletes for making these decisions? For whatever reason. It's all, say a player wants to sit out for social justice reasons. They want to take time and they want to really focus on the cause. Whether you agree with it or not, why are you judging it? They just want to help people. If they're sitting out for family reasons, they just want to make sure their family's safe. That's their right, and that's a good decision. if you want to play and get paid and do and you want to use your platform, whatever, good. If you don't want to play and you want to use your platform and you want to use your time instead of trying to get on camera and go out into the public and help people, good. If you just want to stay at home with your family and raise your two kids, your two new babies, or be with your pregnant wife, or just help your kids out in a time that it's hard because there's no school, good. There's nothing bad about any of these decisions. And the fact that these people are going on social media and flipping out, hey, keyboard warrior, shut the fuck up. No one cares about your fucking opinion. Whatever it is, I don't care. All right? I know this, I say on this podcast, it's sports and only sports. That's what I believe in. That's what I believe. But I will never give you political opinions or anything like that. Those are my beliefs, and I'm going to keep them to myself. Okay, that's for me talking to friends and people around me. But when I'm doing this podcast, I know there's not a lot of listeners right now, but I will never give you my social opinions. You guys don't need to hear them. That's not what this is for. But what I will say is, for you guys that want to go out on this fucking tangents on social media and be keyboard warriors, fuck you. These guys have families. These guys have loved ones. They have their own set of morals, and that's what they believe in. That's what makes this country so great. Freedom of speech and the freedom to do what you think is right for you. And as long as you're not harming anybody, then it's fine. But these keyboard warriors that want to take a shot at Buster Posey for wanting to take care of his two newborns, or even Mike Trout for thinking about sitting out the season, I don't give a shit if he's the best player in the league, for wanting to sit out the season possibly to be with his pregnant wife, and you're taking shots at him, fuck you. Let the guy do what he wants. It's his fucking life. It's his choice whether or not to make money. If he's financially set, let him do it. Now, to get into these NFL players that are sitting out, that's their decision. I don't care what the reason is. It's a fucking time of pandemic. Guess what? Get other players. There's plenty of players on free agent market to to play for your team. And guess what? At the end of the day, you're a fucking fan. You do nothing for the organization. Nothing. This does not affect you. Stop going on social media and fucking blowing up people's shit for making their decisions. That's all I'm going to say about that. All right. So I'm sorry I went on a little tangent that didn't regard any sports or something like that, but I am real passionate about the fact that these guys they have the right to make a choice whether or not to play. Totally get it, right? At the end of the day, they are in entertainment. They are not essential. If they don't want to play, they should not be forced to play. Okay, this is their life. Let them make the decision. But if they don't play, they don't get paid, right? I think that goes without saying. But I want to thank you guys for listening again this week. Fuck the Astros. Have a great weekend.